Welcome to the Rose Show podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I have the honor of being here with a true woman leader in business and in finance, Sue Ennis, VP of Corporate Development of Hut8, one of Canada's largest and most exciting data infrastructure operators and Bitcoin miners. She's also known as Big Suey on Twitter. You are an award-winning emerging technology and innovation champion for the past 15 years or more. You've been instrumental in raising over $1 billion for Canadian structured products and small cap companies. You are a catalyst for generating awareness and interest into hidden gem opportunities. You were one of the first wealth directors at CoinSquare in 2017, as well as other leadership positions. You are a chartered investment manager, certified blockchain expert. The list goes on. Such an honor to have you here today, Sue. How are you?
I'm good and thrilled to be here on the show talking with you and your audience. I'm a big fan of the show, and yeah, let's get into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's begin with your background. How did this all begin, Sue? Were you always as passionate about connections, innovations, and opportunities?
Yeah, so my background is in the financial services space. So I was working with some of the largest asset managers in the world up until about 2016. And the catalyst for me really getting into this industry and into sort of disruptive technology was effectively, it was 2016, and I was becoming incredibly disenchanted with some of the prehistoric processes that I was seeing run the financial services ecosystem in Canada. Everything from how trades were settled in the back office to how identity was shared within different departments within a large organization. And so that's when I started doing research and, really trying to investigate what was the technology that was going to solve for some of these dinosaur legacy tech systems that was underpinning major industry in Canada. And so that's when I learned about distributed ledger. That's when I learned about the blockchain. That's when I learned about Bitcoin. And that's when I decided to leave finance and really try and, become more actively involved in the space. Because in Canada, particularly in Toronto, there is a really robust sort of OG ecosystem. So for example, Vitalik is Canadian, the co-founder of Ethereum. A lot of his also sort of founding fathers of Ethereum lived in Toronto back then. So there's a lot of really interesting projects and sort of grassroots movements that was happening in Canada in 2016 and 2017. And so that's how I got into the space. It really came from being in a place of just like, sometimes I say dead inside on podcasts just because, it can be very boring, very, the mood back then in finance was if it's not broke, don't fix it. And, just move slow, don't try anything new, don't innovate, just sort of status quo. So anyways, it was living in that sort of status quo, dearth of innovation, and knowing that there was more out there that could disrupt how this financial industry was working and moving was what's really got me into it in 2016.
Love that. Wow. A true disruptor, pioneer. Very impressive. Now, with being a disruptor and birthing new industries and emerging leaders, you must have faced some challenges with that. And also being a woman, was that challenging as well? Did you face many challenges?
So you know what? Actually, there's two things. I'm going to tell you about my trip to the Amazon after I answer your question. So I have to say, coming from the finance world into the crypto ecosystem, was there a crypto bro culture? For sure. And, you'd go to parties and it would be like, Lamborghinis and just a lot of sort of insanity, sort of Wolf of Wall Street style partying. So there was definitely a bro culture, which was fine though, because otherwise I actually found the industry incredibly inclusive and welcoming to women, because crypto and a lot of the builders in this space and sort of the whole ethos is, show me what you can do, show me what you can build. And that's sort of your ticket to respect. So I actually found it incredibly inclusive. I worked on this one team at this one company, and some of the chief technology officer would come in sometimes in like LARPing in his live action role play costumes. Because again, a lot of these builders are used to living on the internet, in the dark corners of the internet, or again, like building worlds in like the fourth dimension. And so a lot of the rules that you would think normally apply to gender and the roles of male and female don't apply, in my opinion, in this industry, or at least back then when it was still very, very nascent and sort of grassroots and hadn't really gained mainstream adoption in 2016, 2017, even 2018. So, like, again, we had transgendered people working on our team at this one company I was at, and it wasn't a thing. It wasn't something that people were wary of, versus again, in finance back then, that would have been a topic of conversation around the water cooler, that, oh, the CFO was transgendered, and oh my God, did you see, like, and so that sort of rhetoric, I didn't find it. And that's another thing that I loved about it. It was, what can your brain do? What creators, what kind of worlds can you create using code? That's what people cared about. And it didn't matter if you were male or female. So that was my experience.
That's good to know. Wow.
And I forgot to mention, in terms of like sort of my tipping point into how I got into the industry. So after being completely jaded in finance and like learning about just how disruptive blockchain technology and Bitcoin could be, the real sort of like aha tipping point moment for me, like red orange pill brain melting, was I did this jungle survival course in 2017 in Amazon, Guyana. And so it was me and these two logistics engineers from Doctors Without Borders, and then like a trauma therapist, and then an ex-Special British Forces officer, just like the five of us, navigating how to like survive in the jungle. And we were very, very deep. Anyhow, so there's a lot of ways for first world, dumbasses like us die in the jungle. And so we had a tribe from Amazon Guyana follow us around for the 2 weeks. So, just making sure we didn't step on bullet ant nests, and that we didn't get completely lost, or, fall down a pit of vines and get attacked by a snake. Anyhow, so, and this tribe, they didn't have any formal identification. They didn't know their birthday, but they had cell phones. And at the end of the trip, the chief, the leader, actually asked to be paid for their services in Bitcoin. And so that was like a big moment for me, in the sense that, these are people who would never normally have been able to participate in the formal financial services economy because they didn't have identification. They didn't even know where their birthday was. So how would you KYC them? But here was this technology that was providing them agency and inclusion. And there's something like 1.1 billion people in the world who don't have access to identity, and therefore can't participate in the formal services economy. So that was sort of my brain melting moment of like, wow, I have to stay and get involved with this technology, because it's really solving for some real world problems.
Absolutely. Wow. Fascinating story. You're also an ultra marathon runner as well. Seems like there's nothing you can't do. And it's about mindset. And I want to, before we go into the ultra marathons and the shark research boat, I think also as well, I want to ask you about this Amazon trip. It must have been a real self-discovery and learning about yourself as well. Did you realize if you had any fears? Did you overcome any fears? Are you afraid of snakes like me?
So I'm not afraid of snakes, but I will say that I think I certainly lived in a constant state of heightened anxiety, because again, there are so many ways to die when you're like deep in the jungle. Like there's killer bees nests and bullet ants and snakes and howler monkeys that don't attack generally, but like there have been instances where that's happened. So I certainly learned that I am someone who definitely likes my clean showers. I like my manicures. I like my nice purses. But I do also really like, obviously, pushing my comfort zones. And I definitely got that out of this trip. Am I going to go back and do it again? Absolutely not. But yeah, it was definitely a good exercise in terms of like really pushing myself beyond my comfort zone, which I think is a very important thing to do throughout your lifetime. So yeah.
Absolutely. Sue in the jungle. That makes for a great story. So the shark and research boats and the ultra marathon, it seems like this is all part of your same mindset. Could you just tell us about your mindset?
Yeah, I really do truly believe that like life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. And that, constantly challenging yourself is incredibly important to make sure that you're on sort of an evolutionary path. Like what's that quote? If you're not growing, you're dying. So like there is
Absolutely.
no status quo in life. And so again, I think it's very important to get into the habit of choosing to get a little uncomfortable, because it's very easy to choose comfort, but you have to choose discomfort in order to sort of level up. So yeah, that's something I try and do as much as possible.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that one. I always say that as well. It's either growing or dying. So you have to constantly challenge yourself and put yourself out of that comfort zone to keep going for it every day. And success is not about not falling, but it's about picking yourself up and going for it over and over again. I always speak of Rocky. It's not how hard you hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Totally.
So
And also, I'm a firm believer that failure is just data collection. Failure is just data collection. And like the whole purpose of life is, even if you fail, at least you've got the data to then make a different decision next time, and to glean that intelligence and then keep moving forward. So
absolutely love it. We're always learning, and
yeah,
absolutely. And, by falling down, making mistakes, it's all part of the learning process that makes us better and stronger.
for
So
sure.
I'm with you on that, being a serial entrepreneur now for, I think, 25 years. So it's been a process, I have to say. And you're gorgeous too, by the way. And everyone's going to want to see the YouTube video.
Oh my gosh,
You
please.
look amazing. You're so smart, and you're so like just very impressive. I admire you, Sue. So before we get into Hut 8, and Hut 8 is also CEO is a woman,
That's
Jamie
right.
Leverton, which is so amazing as well. Before we get into Hut, I'd like to talk about Bitcoin
For
and
sure.
your thoughts about Bitcoin and the future.
For sure. So I briefly touched on, some of the things that Bitcoin is really solving for. If you even look at some of the stats that have recently been released from the UN, something like only 2 out of every 10 people globally lives in actual democratic and free country. So that's 8 out of 10 people who live in an area or a country where you can't trust your banks, or you can't trust the government, or you can't, you don't have access to formal identification systems. If you even look at from an inflation perspective, what's happened in Turkey, Venezuela, Lebanon, these are people who are having their life savings inflated away by their by the people in control of the monetary systems there, and are just debasing on whims. And so that's something that I think Bitcoin really solves for, because again, you don't have sort of an elitist group of humans deciding, what money is going to be worth. It's code, it's math, it's on a set schedule, it's on a set fixed supply schedule. And so that is what I think is really exciting about Bitcoin. Also, if you look at if Bitcoin were to capture, because a lot of people talk about Bitcoin as digital gold, because it's finite, it's scarce. But the reason why it's digital is because you can obviously, transact with it over the internet and peer to peer. Versus carrying gold bars in your pocket. So if you look at the potential for Bitcoin to capture even 2 to 3% of gold's place in traditional and in institutional or just retail investor portfolios, given the supply constraints of Bitcoin, that is, that's a potential world where Bitcoin is worth more than, 50, 80, $100,000 per coin. So what I really like about it, and the future Bitcoin, I think, is we're going to see greater adoption, because regulation is now making it easier for institutions to adopt the technology. The technology itself is growing in terms of different countries are now able to, people in different countries are now able to access the on and off ramp so that they can transact in Bitcoin or trade in and out of their local currency into digital dollars. And so, yeah, I certainly see a world where we continue to see adoption of this alternative asset class, and this alternative monetary system is really what it is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Now, just for fun, do you have an idea for a value of Bitcoin in the near future? I know Kathy Wood said 1.5 million or something like that, I think. Do you have any ideas?
Look, I'm a big fan of Kathy. We love Kathy here at Hut 8. I'm more of the school of sort of calculating Bitcoin's value based on capturing a certain percent of gold's market cap. And so given right now where that is, again, that's sort of like a $90,000 to $100,000 range within the next like maybe 5 to 10 years. Because again, what's really sort of the catalyst, I think, for greater adoption and therefore greater price appreciation is not only is the supply of Bitcoin halving in May of 2024, but you really have this growing suite of on-ramps so that everyone can access, Bitcoin, regardless of sort of what country you're in, as long as you have internet connection. And so I think, yeah, I'm more in the camp of like, let's say we'll probably see $100,000 Bitcoin maybe one day, but also who knows, anything's possible, right?
Yeah.
So.
I love that. I'll take it. I hope Bitcoin. So that sounds great. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Well said, Sue. You have a special way of simplifying complex concepts into actionable, investable ones. And we admire that. So what I'd like to do now is have you tell us about Hut 8. If you could explain to us the core business functions. Now, you guys are from digital asset mining to gaming and blockchain, Web3. It's amazing. True innovation. Please tell us about Hut.
Yeah, so Hut 8, we're one of the oldest and largest digital asset Bitcoin miners in the industry. And the significance of why we focus on the fact that we're one of the oldest is the fact that we've been able to build and scale our business regardless of sort of market cycles. So, we've obviously captured a ton of upside in bull markets, but we've clearly been in a bear market for a little over a year, maybe 10 months at this point. And so, we've really learned firsthand from multiple bull and bear market cycles, the importance of taking a balance sheet first approach to everything that you do and to how you grow and create value for shareholders. So unfortunately, there's a couple of our competitors in this space, and even some of, just other companies in the industry in 2022 that took on too much debt, got over their skis. A couple of people have gone bankrupt. So being the oldest has certainly helped us learn just the importance of staying very conservative so that you can continue to thrive and build in bear markets. About a year and a half ago, we bought traditional vanilla data centers. And so one of the reasons why we did that is Jamie, our CEO, her background is actually in the traditional data center transformation mandate space. So she's the gal that companies like BlackBerry and IBM have called in when they have a piece of infrastructure that desperately needs to be innovated, but they just can't figure out how to do it. She's the gal who comes in and transforms that business. And so really what we see is a real merger between the traditional data center space, energy, and then Bitcoin. Because at the end of the day, all of those different businesses are just energy infrastructure businesses. And so that's why we're really excited to continue to build sort of out these hybrid data center models where there's Bitcoin mining happening and support for some of the companies in the industry. Because again, we provide data infrastructure services, and continuing to build. Sometimes how I pitch Hut 8 is that we're sort of like a call option on the future of this industry as well, because every single one of these new companies that you hear about, Web3 applications, Web 2.5, all cloud server gaming, all of it needs data infrastructure and compute. And that's what we're in the business of, is data infrastructure and compute. So we kind of look at it as you don't have to bet on the winning racehorse when you own the racetrack. So yeah, that's Hut 8.
I love it. Hut 8 sounds amazing. You have a very strong balance sheet, and we read that all the time in the news. And, reducing debt is key, especially in an environment of rising rates. And tightening liquidity. So you've done very well with that. And we're very excited to hear more about this upcoming merger that you have planned. Before we get into that, there is something that the CEO, Jamie, had said, which I want to ask you about: selling production. Could you explain exactly what that term means?
Yeah. So as a Bitcoin miner, you produce a certain amount of Bitcoins every month, right? Because you're in the business. You're sort of like the Fed for Bitcoin, because you mint new coins and then put them into circulation. And so one of the things, obviously, about being in any industry, but especially in the crypto industry, is that, you cannot control macroeconomic forces, but you can certainly control how you manage your cash and your Bitcoin balance. And we really believe that an effective treasury management strategy is essential for long-term survival. The whole point of why we've been holding on to so much of our Bitcoin is so that we could be strategic in a bear market. And like I said, not be at the mercy of other financing options that, were not ideal.
I love that. Very smart. HUT, I read, is one of the few miners that holds its mined digital assets. And I believe you have over 9,000 Bitcoin now. And there's great news that just came out today about what you mined in January. Could you please tell us about that?
Yeah. So look, we're still, even though we have publicly announced plans to sell some of our production and perhaps sell down a little bit of our stack, it's all in the spirit of growing shareholder value. So so we still got over 9,274 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. That is the highest amount of self-mined Bitcoin of any publicly traded company as at January 31st. So again, it's the benefit is that it's given us a lot of flexibility. And I will also say, HUT, we were one of the first companies in the bull market to actually put our stack to work. So we had 2,000 of our Bitcoin that was actually earning yield in a yield program. So that was, part of our whole philosophy is building as many lines of fiat-based revenue so that we can ultimately continue to mine and hold Bitcoin on our balance sheet. So yeah, that's how we've looked at Bitcoin and our stack management.
That's the way to go. Multiple streams of income, and especially during these times of compressed margins. I love a very fascinating way of aligning your business. And I also read from Jamie had said that you're building a large unencumbered stack to cover potentially operating expenses. So you can avoid going the standard financial route with also higher rates at this time. So I love that. I love that approach. Now, could you tell us how HUT is positioning itself for Web3? And when do you anticipate we'll see Web3, in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's really hard to say in terms of when we're going to see sort of the real sort of birth of Web3. I mean, I think we're certainly already starting to see it with the advent of, there's a lot of peer-to-peer lending applications, because Web3 is really effectively about disrupting the intermediaries who have controlled your experience of the internet. So the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. And so, for example, the advent of ChatGPT, you could technically say that is a Web3 oriented application. And I've played around quite a bit on it, and it is really cool. But I think, it's tough to really define Web3 because it's supposed to be effectively about the disintermediation of the masters of the internet. And so ChatGPT is very exciting, but there's still a centralized company that created that algorithm, right? And then you hear about how China is now creating their own ChatGPT, and Microsoft's coming out with one, and Google's coming out with its own as well. So, but again, that's all in the direction of Web3, and where HUT plays in that whole Web3 growth and ecosystem is from the infrastructure and computing perspective, because no matter what application is running, it all needs compute. It all needs infrastructure. And that's effectively how we are capturing, what we think is going to be capturing the upside as the industry continues to grow.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I like your business planning and your goals. Seems very exciting. This is the time to build during the bear market. So it looks like you have a very bright future ahead. And speaking of that future, where do you see HUT 8 in about 5 years? What would be the plan or the goals?
Yeah, so look, we haven't publicly disclosed any formal guidance or outlook, so I'm a little limited in terms of what I can say, but I can certainly tell you what we're bullish on.
Yes.
We're very bullish on Bitcoin and mining Bitcoin into the next halving, so into the next supply reduction event of Bitcoin, which is May 2024. But look, we're also incredibly excited about just the growth, like we've talked about, the growth of the Web3 space, the growth of the cloud gaming space, the growth of the AI space, and the growth of the digital asset ecosystem. All of those industries need compute. And there was, I believe it was in the Morgan Stanley 2023 Outlook, one of the things they explicitly called out was there's something like a $15 trillion gap worth of infrastructure that's needed to support the growth of a digital world, to support the growth of the renewable energy space. And also, again, just really the growth of where the internet is going. And Hut 8, we feel that we're very well positioned to capture some of that upside and to be a real player in terms of, from an infrastructure perspective and an energy management perspective. And so we're really excited about that. And so that, and again, that could potentially take us into, like I said, like supporting infrastructure on the AI side of things. We're already doing it on the Web3 side of things. There's also a really interesting complement that even the White House has written, has called out in some of their digital asset reports. And there's quite a few other research studies that have been done that talk about how miners are a complement to renewable grid operators, because we're sort of a 24/7 off taker of demand. And one of the things that renewable grids really struggle with is sort of that intermittency of demand. And so when you have a partner, let's say like a Bitcoin miner, that can take off excess energy, because grids at all times need to be balanced. So when you have a partner that can help take excess energy, or again, if the grid needs energy, can easily power down and provide energy back to the grid, that's a real meaningful partner in sort of this transition to renewables and renewable grid operation in North America. So that's another thing that we think is really interesting, and we hope to probably, I at least hope that we play a bigger role in. So yeah, that's sort of where we see things going.
I love that. The energy, and we have so many challenges in the energy space. So we need to turn to, in my opinion, renewable sources and blockchain energy, the grid that you speak about. Fascinating, in my opinion, the future. And to hear that you are aligning yourself in that space as well, very impressive. So the takeaway here, the last question I have for you before we get into how we can stay in touch with you, is for everyone, all the listeners, what differentiates Hut 8? I think you talked about it, you touched upon it, but in a nutshell, what is your competitive advantage over competitors, please?
Yeah, I think leading up through the past year, it has certainly been our balance sheet first approach to everything that we do. And then I think moving forward, it's really the strength of our diversification and strategy in that space. So, we're not just a single threaded business, we're a multifaceted, multiple different lines of revenue, and really an infrastructure business that has a tremendous amount of potential in the energy space, in the mining space, in the high performance computing space. And so it's that diversification of business operations that I think is a major differentiator for us.
Absolutely. I love that. Diversification is key. I always speak about myself, and innovation. Those are two great combinations, and Hut 8 sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Sue. Now, please tell us how, shareholders can stay in touch. It's Hut, is that symbol correct? HUT?
Yeah, you can definitely reach out to us, info@hut8.io. And then you can always reach me on Twitter. It's at Big Suey, BIGSUEY. My DMs are open and happy to chat anytime.
I love that. How did you come up with Big Suey? I just have to ask.
Honestly, I had a partner who, so I was actually a social media antichrist in 2014. And I had a partner who was big up at Facebook, and it was becoming a point of contention in our relationship that I didn't take social media seriously. And so then I was like, fine, I'll take it seriously. And I made sort of like a joke account called Big Suey 6969. And obviously I dropped the 69 when I joined a publicly traded company. But anyways, the name just sort of stuck. I started getting a little tiny bit of a following, and I was like, whatever, I'll just keep it. But yeah, it started off as sort of a joke and like a middle finger to my social media obsessed partner in 2014.
Wow, that's quite funny. Big Suey, I love your tenacity and your forward thinking and Ep.38. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for taking the time today to share with us
You.
everything.
Thank you so much. See you.
See you.